Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Hi.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. I, on behalf of the entire Legal Vidhi team, would like to welcome you all to today's webinar on the topic the New Education Policy 2020. Our speaker guest is Mr. Aditya Jain. I would like to introduce Sir. Aditya Jain is advocate on record, Supreme Court of India. Furthermore, he's also the partner at a law firm named J&G Advocates. He has been practicing in the Supreme Court and High Court of Rajasthan since 2013. He graduated from the Gujarat National Law University in 2013, Gandhinagar. Since then, he's been practicing in various courses across the country and also has been actively part of the NGO called Muskan Foundation for the road safety and has been playing a vital role since then. Apart from that, he has also been invited to present the research paper on various conferences on the diverse topics such as arbitration, environmental law, etc. In the 7 years of practice, he has dealt with various cases of diverse kinds. Apart from that, he has also dealt in cases of, of many public interest litigations before the High Court of Rajasthan and the Supreme Court. Thank you. Over to you, Shalini.
Thank you, Nikita. We also have Advocate Neha Zamlani with us today. Ma'am is an independent lawyer at Rajasthan High Court. She also completed her studies from DES NFLC Law College, Ferguson College, Pune University. She was also a legal counsel at Bharat Vyas and Associate. Currently, she is a partner at J&G Advocates, Jaipur. So, sir, ma'am, you should start.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. We're pleased to have you all here. So today we both will be talking about the new education policy of 2020 and what key changes it has brought about in the current education system of our country. As a matter of fact, the policy, when I first went through the policy, it came across as a surprise to me because the policy is pragmatic in its approach. It's got several provisions, it's got several things to it which are revolutionary in nature, which, if implemented, could lead to good and beneficial changes to the Indian education system. The 5 plus 3, 3 plus 4 approach is one such thing. However, there are such many provisions in the new policy which goes against the very spirit of our constitution. We would be discussing that in detail. I would now like to hand over the discussion to Neha, who would be giving us a brief historical background as to what led to this policy. And thereafter, we would both be discussing the policy in detail. Over to you, Neha. Has she joined? Shalin, hello.
I guess that
Yes,
she hasn't joined.
no,
I'll
she
just, I'll
hasn't
just
joined yet.
She had joined just now. She had joined. You make a request again because she may not have heard you.
hello. Has she joined, Shafia?
Yes, sir, she joined. Yes, she joined.
Okay.
She joined.
So Neha, we would want you to tell us in brief about what led to this policy, as to what were the pre-deliberations which had in the government which had led to this policy, and why do you think this policy is necessary? Your views on it. Hello. Are you there, Neha? Hello. I think she's with us now. Yeah. Yeah, Neha, you there? Hello.
Ma'am, kindly unmute your mic if you are muted.
Yeah, please.
I've unmuted from my side.
Yes, Neha, are you there?
Kindly unmute.
It's unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Neha, we would request you to give a brief historical perspective as to what led to this policy. What are the pre-deliberations in the government with regard to this policy, and which led to this policy?
Aditya, can you please repeat? Your voice is breaking.
I'm saying that we would like you to enlighten us all as to the reasons which led to this policy. What were the pre-deliberations in the government and in the union sector which had led to this policy?
Okay. All of you.
We can hear you. Yeah, please go on. Yeah.
Yes. So the new education policy, as we all know, has been introduced and which has brought several changes in the Indian education system from the school level till the college level. There's been some changes for such as the change of the Human Resource Development Ministry to the Education Ministry.
Sorry to interrupt,
and-
ma'am. You can on your camera also. Perhaps that is also off.
My camera is on. Whosoever is asking me, my camera is on. I'm unmuted from my side.
Camera is on, but it's not coming. The image is not coming. That's all.
My camera is on. I can see the blue light in my webcam. I'll just check again. Just a second. It's on only. It's in fact asking me to turn off, so I can turn it off and not on. It's on.
Okay, ma'am.
Please check from your side. Maybe there's some problem there.
Yes, maybe in my side there may be some problem.
Okay. Yes. In fact, even I cannot see myself, and I can see all of you other people. My camera is on. I can see it.
Okay.
Okay. So shall I go on?
Yes. Yes. Now, ma'am, go
Yes,
ahead.
Neha, please, we would like you to enlighten us
Yes.
on that. Yeah.
Okay. So, as we know that this is the third education policy, or we can call it as a third major revamp of the framework of our Indian education system in India since independence. The first education policy came up in 1968, and subsequently it was revamped in 1986. As we know what happened in 1986, we passed, for example, start from the constitutional provisions of the education in India. As we all know that Part 4 of Indian Constitution and the Articles 45 and 39 of Directive Principles of State Policy, they have a provision for state-funded as well as for the equitable and accessible education for all of us in India. 1976, there was a 42nd amendment which moved the education from the state list to the concurrent list. So broadly now, the education policies are made by the central government, They provide a broad direction, and the state governments are expected to follow it. But it is not mandatory, as we all know that some states do not follow some kind of structure. For example, Tamil Nadu does not follow the three language formula prescribed by the first education policy. In 2002, there was an 86th amendment which made education enforceable right under Article 21, precisely Article 21A. 2009, we came up with the right to education, which provides primary education to all children from age group 6 to 14 years and enforces education as a fundamental right. This is very important because it was brought in 2009, and simultaneously it also brought where there should be some kind of reservation for the disadvantaged sections of the society. Now, the government initiatives are also there, which are carrying on the agenda of education and which improve the education policy at the school level, then at the college level, then at the higher education level, and then come at the vocational training, which is also a part of our education system only. Now, what was the problem was that the major problem in the early education policies was with respect to the gross enrollment ratio, which is enforced by the government at each level. For example, the gross enrollment ratio of the primary education is different than the secondary, and finally the higher higher education and the higher technical education sector. So the government with the previous policies was not able to ensure the gross enrollment ratio. Now we desire the gross enrollment ratio through some kind of, like, for 2035 we have to attain to this level, we have to attain to this level. So this we were not able to attain it with the previous education policies, because the previous education policies was having some kind of gap with respect to the enrollment of students of some age groups. For example, age group 3 to 5 doesn't talk about of any school education. They are not, it's very informal system, like they're sent to kindergartens which are not taking into consideration the facts and the figures of what kind of education should that the toddler should be enrolled into, so that he can develop into a good he can develop and finally get into the school curriculum from 6 years of age. So we were talking from the school education perspective from 6 to 14 years of age. Now the major change which Aditya will brief you into is the major change which we have got into is we are also enrolling 3 to 5 years of age group. So the new education policy is being carried out in a way that it will firstly there some kind of curricular structure which has been made corresponding to the ages. For example, the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 curriculum structure has been made corresponding to 5 is for age 3 to 8, 3 is for age 8 to 11, again 3 is for age 11 to 14, and 4 is for 14 to 18 years respectively. Now, what will be the structural correction in the gross enrollment ratio is the gross enrollment ratio at all these stages, the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 will be calculated and brought into the picture of the public. Secondly, the major change which has been brought into the school education is that these class 12th and 10th and 12th board examinations, which are very technical, in fact we call it very hyper technical. So these exams are supposed to be made easier. With respect to that, these exams won't be tested on some kind of memorized facts, but they will test the core competencies. Now, the core competencies have still to be designed by the national curriculum framework for the curriculum framework, which will be designed later on. One more important thing which this national education policy is brought into is that these 12 years of schooling with 3 years of the Anganwadi or the preschooling will be calculated all together. The schooling is not exactly now from the 6 years of age. Schooling is the kindergarten, schooling is also schooling. School governance was running on with no kind of framework. Now there would be a framework which is called as a new accreditation framework, and some kind of independent authority will be regulating these kind of regulating this framework separately for the public and the private schools. So these are policies, and now the policy has to change because of the newer kind of trends which are going on in the education. With respect to the higher education in India, again, there was a problem of the gross enrollment ratio, which is very low as of now. Approximately 22 to 23% of gross enrollment ratio in the higher education sector is available for us, whereas on the other hand, we are targeting it to be 30% in 2020, and we are targeting huge in until 2035. So this kind of robust demand in the market, having certain investments and the policy support and the competitive advantages for all the kind of different curriculum of the education, different curriculum in the education sector. So these kind of changes were being demanded.
From 8 to 11 years, from classes 3 to 5. It would talk about the preparatory stage would focus on reading, writing, speaking, physical education, art, languages, science, and mathematics, which is obviously a noble intentioned thing again. But how this would be implemented, we have to see. The middle stage, again, from classes 6 to 8, 11 to 14 years, focus would be on sciences, mathematics, arts, social sciences, and humanities. And last, the secondary stage. Now, the secondary stage, I think, basically is for understudies for 14 to 18 years. And here the policy says the focus would be on life aspirations, greater flexibility, and student choice. To attain the objective of greater flexibility in education, it says the education system will now do away with compulsory choosing between science, commerce, and arts in the 11th and 12th standard. And the three streams would remain the same, but the subjects would be intermingled so as to make sure the student gets more exposure. And he does not have to choose, he gets more exposure, and then probably in the graduation he could specialize. I think which is also a welcome step, because we should not make sure that because I think that education till 10th standard is very primary, and in-depth knowledge of certain subjects are required before entering into college. And it is very unwise on the part of student to make a choice in 11th and 12th standard as to the subjects which he wants to study, because there you cannot expect a student to have that much of clarity when in 11th grade, because again our education system as such does not permit us to that much of exposure, I would say. So I think that is again a welcome step, which I think is a good step, I think, in this regard. Also, the concept of introducing report cards to have AI-driven analysis of performance, which I think again is a good part, because I think analysis not only during the exams, analysis at every step of how a student is performing is necessary. So this AI-driven analysis of performance could go a long way in making sure that a student is well aware of his performance every 2 weeks or every month. So there could be exercises which are given to him, or there could be some assignments which should be given to him on a regular basis, so as to do away with the concept of the final examination, because that concept I don't really endorse, because a final exam or half-yearly exam, I think there should be regular exercises of diverse nature which would enable the student to assess himself, his performance, and which would also enable him. See, self-assessment is necessary. No matter what your parents tell you, till a student is sure as to what he's good at and what he's skilled at, he would not be able to choose. So I think self-assessment through AI-driven report cards could be a good step. However, it remains to be seen as to till what extent and what manner this would be introduced. Implementational issues would be there, because India, as we all know, is a diverse country with plethora of governments at in every state. So I think what we could do is to make sure what the government could do is to make sure that it takes into concern the concerns of every state government in this regard, because every state has a different literacy rate, has different dynamics, has different kind of people. So the concerns really need to be understood by the union government of every state, so as to make sure that they achieve a minimum common goal. So that is, I think, a discussion is again very much required from stakeholders, even post this policy, so as to make sure that their concerns are addressed. Now, one more thing I think which this policy introduces is the Higher Education Council of India. Um, the policy says that the council would be based on transparent public disclosure and use technologically intensively to reduce human interface to ensure efficiency and transparency in their work, which is a good step. The NEP also suggests a creation of a transparent regulatory authority by elimination of all regulatory bodies like UGC, Indian Council for Technical Education, which is also a good step. But creating a single body like NTA, National Testing Agency, is the body to test for conducting exams. So creating a single common body for accreditation and regulation, funding, and academic standard setting may not be a good idea till we finalize the exact structure of that policy, of that body. Again, as I said, the constitution of that body would be very important in this regard. Why constitution would be important is because till we're not sure, or till we're not confident about the constitution of that body, though it could be again technologically based, but obviously it has to be a certain body of experts need to be there to make sure that to revise the policy every now and then. So these are the changes which are there in the policy. Now, this is all in the papers. This is all in the papers, and obviously, as you all must be knowing, the name of the policy has now been changed from HRD Ministry to the Education Ministry, which is obviously a good step. Where this policy lacks now, I think a lot of areas. I and Neha would be discussing now, since we have like 20 minutes left. So I think I would ask Neha to give her views on where the policy lacks, and then we can have a discussion. Even I can give my views on the same. So Neha, over to you.
Yes, Aditya.
So Neha, what do you think? Where do you think the policy lacks? We can have a discussion now since 20 minutes are left. And you can ask me some questions about what are your concerns with regard to the policy and what are my concerns. So I would like to ask you, where do you personally think the policy lacks?
The foremost thing which comes into my mind is how are we going to implement it? Like, for example, the major issue comes is this is a central policy, and now because the education is in the concurrent list, the states, with respect to the language and with respect to the enrollment and with respect to many other things, want to come in the forefront, the states. So how do you think that national education policy will be able to combine the concerns of the state as well as the major challenges which were already present in our previous education policy? So how will the state address these things to be simultaneously with the center?
Okay. So do you want me to answer that?
Yes.
Okay. So Neha, I think the state, the policy, since it's a policy document and it's been introduced by the center, and since education, as you rightly pointed out, is in the concurrent list, so we see that there are central boards and there are state boards which are there in every state. And the functioning of central boards like CBSE or ICSE is controlled majorly by the center, and the functioning of the state boards is governed majorly by the states. So I think the implementation won't be much of a problem, where I think the state agree with the majority of this policy document. There are states, as per my knowledge, there are states which have opposed this policy on a lot of grounds. Rajasthan is one state which has. Same is about Kerala. Kerala is also one state which is not really endorsed this policy towards maximum and Tamil Nadu as well, because they have their I think especially Kerala and Tamil Nadu have the robust state boards which have their own educational curriculum. So the government, as I said, the government will have to sit with on the table. The ministry and the bureaucrats will have to sit on the table with certain, state level representatives and discuss as to what is the actual essence of this policy. The essence of this policy is not to create autonomy with the central government. The essence of the policy should be to make education seamless and to make education fruitful. Why I say fruitful is because as of now, in all these years, what we've seen is education is not bearing any result. People do various degrees, people study in schools and colleges, and still they are unemployable, as called by various MNCs. They are unemployable because they are not taught key skills. Why they aren't taught key skills is because there is lack of resources at school and college level so as to make sure that they're given adequate exposure. These infrastructure, these resources should be the duty of the state. The union, the state government, it is their duty, it is their pristine duty to give these infrastructure and resources and to make sure they appoint good teachers, good lecturers in government schools. They encourage them to join government schools. Now, as we see, all good teachers, all senior teachers are going to private schools.
Yes.
If they are going to private schools, why is this a policy document? Why is this policy document important? Would it apply in its true essence to private schools? I think not, because Supreme Court and TMFI's judgment and a lot of other judgments has clearly said that private unaided schools have their own autonomy and they cannot be totally run by government mandate. They are autonomous bodies and their rules, though they are rules like the RTE and other acts which are constitution, which is the constitutional amendment, though it applies to private schools as well. But the government cannot control such schools. So the Supreme Court has said it in a number of judgments. So the government should be more of a facilitator than a controller, I would say. There should be more of governance and less of government here. And I think that is it. Now, my question to you, Neha, would be is basically divided into two parts.
Yes.
Now, I would like to what I would want from you. I want to understand from you as to why do you think our education system needs an overhaul? One. Secondly, what are the good parts about this policy which you endorse, which you would endorse, and which you would want to be implemented in their true letter and spirit? So these two questions I have for you.
Okay. So I will answer the second part first. I will talk specifically about the higher education segment. So I would just see, let's see that what were the trends in the higher education segment, which this new policy has considered also, and it is bringing the policy in forefront of the higher education segment here. So first we'll talk about that some kind of specialized degrees which are gaining the popularity in India, which this new education policy is promoting. So new education policy says that more and more students are opting for the industry-focused qualifications. It means that the demand for these specialized degrees is picking up. So why are these specialized degrees, demand for such specialized degrees picking up? For basically the industry-focused qualifications, because more and more students like us, they want some kind of industry specialized qualifications in the experience so that we can easily learn and get into the job. So that does such kind of education. So see, the most important change with this new education policy is bringing into the higher education segment is that focusing on to complement the learning with the qualification. So the learning and the qualification is important because we have to work in that field. So now the result would be that a lot of universities now will be offering the MBA and the technical degrees with focus upon the specific sectors which was very much needed in India. So this is one such example which this new education policy will bring into the higher segment, the higher education segment. Second thing is the multi-campus model, which was already gaining popularity across the globe and across the India also. It means that many private institutions, they are adopting multi-city campus model to scale up their operations, and they were also expanding across the untapped market in the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities. Now, what is needed is in these cities in the tier 2 and the tier 3 segment is that such kind of campuses should come up, which the campuses which provide the certain kind of the various kind of degrees in one campus. So these kind of campuses were lacking, and this new education policy is straight away promoting such kind of multi-campus model which were already there, but now they would be also spreading in the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities. Third thing for the international third thing is the international collaboration which we were looking forward from many years. Now we must have all been through at such stage that we want to pursue for a better technical education. We want to go abroad and pursue. Except the IITs, many sectors of the education, except the engineering, many people feel that, for example, law, that we need some kind of specific technical knowledge which we'll be able to gain in the foreign university. Now, what if the foreign universities are collaborating with your own colleges at the time of your own curriculum in the college? So what's better than that? These kind of things were happening already in many foreign countries, especially in the European and the US was providing the facilities to the European countries for this. Okay, so US universities have been long. If one must have been analyzing the trend here, these universities were visiting India since 2018 for such kind of exchange programs. For example, there is one US-India knowledge exchange program. Now, these exchange programs are interacting with all the institutions and all the government representatives to encourage such kind of collaborative research and innovation in various fields between the two countries. And for that, they are promoting to set up even the campuses and in fact even provide their services to the already established campuses of the Indian universities. So this is one such thing which will be coming up resultingly of this new education policy in terms of the international collaboration. As far as 2020 is concerned, there are around 10 such research proposals under various schemes of the US itself, which are promoting such kind of collaborative research and innovation in the campuses of India itself.
Yes.
Maharashtra especially has signed a collaboration agreement with Google, which is a very big thing for education in India. So the whole Maharashtra state has signed an interesting collaboration agreement with the Google for providing such kind of practices to be incorporated in the school curriculum. The International Education Board of Maharashtra has provided such kind of opportunity for the school children that Google should come up and provide such kind of practical experiences in the respective fields to the students. Okay. So these kind of things are already happening. So this is the answer to your second part, Aditya, that what positive such policy will bring into such specific segments. So this is one such example in the segment of higher education. Now, one more good example is in the segment of the vocational training segment in India, because the school segment is mostly regulated by the state itself, the India itself. Now, I would like to focus specifically on one thing, that sometimes we don't understand the landscape of the Indian education system. We just consider that these schools and the colleges are the whole sole landscape of the Indian education system, but never forget that there is one segment which is sort of a non-formal, which comes under the category of a non-formal setup. We see the preschools. Now the preschools will also be brought into the school curriculum according to in the segment of 3 to 5 years of age, exactly. So what now comes up in the non-formal setup are these coaching classes, these multimedia schools, these vocational training centers, education material suppliers. Now, one thing which is lacking in the new education policy is very strategically they have omitted the coaching centers and the education suppliers and the vocational training centers. Not entirely the vocational education centers, but majorly these coaching classes have been omitted in the new education policy, which was being demanded by the student itself. Because major of for example, we see that after school some people go for many kind of exams. They go into the examination preparation. For example, the major examination which Indians go into is UPSC and the state public service commissions, the judicial services. And who are teaching all these people? The coaching centers are teaching all these people. So shouldn't we count them in the education sector of India? So this is a major question which this new education policy brings into the question, that why these sectors have still been omitted after so many years. After 1986, if we are bringing up education policy in 2020, so why have we forgotten all these things? So I
Yes,
guess
Neha,
next,
yeah.
this is the big concern, Aditya.
Yes, I think you, as you correctly pointed out, the focus on for foreign collaborations and vocational training should form the forefront of this policy, or should form the forefront of any government policy in this regard. And
Yes.
though this policy document mentions these two aspects, but it does not give a lot of explanation on how it would be, how this mission of the government would be carried out. So I think this is one area where we seek some kind of clarity from the government's end, and I would request all the stakeholders in the education sector to give their suggestions on this policy before it is finalized as an act or a bill. So this is one area I would like to focus on. Secondly, I think Neha, one more aspect which is important is what about the states? You mentioned that Maharashtra has some foreign collaborations with some foreign universities. Because as we all know, GDP wise, I think Maharashtra is a rich state, I would say. But
Yes.
what about the states which are not, which don't have a big GDP, which are,
Yes.
I would say, not, which are backward states? So what about those states? Why should the students of those states be made to suffer because of the fact that they are studying or born in those states? So the policy, the division of funds to states for education, even the state government run schools should receive, I think, some funding from the center. Because see, between the center and the state government, if there is some kind of friction, the sufferers would be the students. In such states which do not have that kind of financial autonomy as Maharashtra does. So I think this is one area where the policy should have focused on these backward states which do not enjoy such kind of financial autonomy, especially in government schools of such states. We see schools in UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. These states are somewhere lagging behind. Delhi is a shining example of how government school education could be transformed. But that again was possible due to state intervention, due to active intervention of the ministry. So
Yes.
we need more such, I think, revolutionaries in our states as well. Now, I think, Shafia, we would like to take questions. I think a lot of questions are there from the speakers, from the participants. Sorry.
Yes.
So I think, can you just, send those questions to us or dictate those questions to us so that we can answer them?
Yes, sir, sure.
Yes.
Questions are there in the chat box also.
So should we read them, Asem, or like would you?
We can read it out.
You can read it out first. That will be better. Yeah.
Yeah. The one question is from Gurneet Arora,
Yes.
and she says, students who are in class 12 now, will they have to go for college now, or do they have to continue class 12? Is the policy needs to be implemented from now only, or it will take time?
Aneha, would you like to take this one?
Yes, Gurneet, it will take time to implement the policy. And if your particular question is like this, that students who are in class 12th now, will they have to go for colleges now, or they have to continue class 12 now? Everything would be clear in some time actually, because this is the education policy which has come up. So the policy, how it is to be implemented, and since when it is to be implemented, and what would be, how the curriculum in the current schools and the colleges would change, since when it would change, from which semester, from from which quarterly part of the year it will change. So that would still be that is still to be notified yet.
Yes. Next.
Yes,
Okay, sir.
another
The
question
another
is,
question is from Supreet Sharma. He is asking, is this fair to adopt new policy in education? Who will be implemented?
Sorry, can you come again? Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, sir. He is asking, is this fair to adopt the new policy in education?
So it's not about is it fair or not. It's about what are the good parts of the policy and what are the bad parts of it. What are the not so good parts of it. So as we already shared, the good parts of it are: one is Lok Vidya, one is foreign collaborations, one is the 5+3+3+4 formula, one is the AI driven report cards. These are some of the good aspects of this policy. Some not so good aspects of this policy are mandatory mother tongue, some lack of clarity about the constitution of the Higher Education Council of India or the NHERC Regulatory Council. So these are the areas which lack clarity, because see, regulation in education, I personally feel the regulation should only be to that extent wherein you cannot judge the conduct, you cannot judge the autonomy of the institutions. There should be an autonomy which should be given to the institutions. You can only judge, or you can only regulate the malpractices. So even government schools should be given autonomy, and with autonomy comes transparency, because if you give them autonomy and then if you just encourage them by financially supporting them, which the government should, I think then they will be able to perform better, because that's a basic human tendency. Everyone wants to be autonomous and encouraged. So I think that should be done by the government rather than fully regulating them to a lot of extent, because that would really lead to no result. That would render this policy ineffective. If there's too much of regulation.
Moreover, guys, this national education policy or new education policy that only provides a broad direction. It is not mandatory to follow.
Yeah.
Since education is a concurrent subject, so both the center and the state government will make laws on it. Now, the reforms which are proposed, they can be implemented collaboratively only by the states and the center and the states. And this will not happen immediately. As the incumbent government has set a target of 2040 to implement the entire policy. Secondly, sufficient funds are very crucial into it, as the many previous education policies and the directions have failed because of shortage of funds. Now, the government, what it is do is that they will plan up to set up different committees. For example, subject-wise committees. Now, the subjects won't be just limited to the school, the college, the vocational, and all. The subject will be more specific to it. For example, the foreign collaboration education committees. So these kind of committees will be set up with members from the relevant ministries at both the central level, the state level, to develop the implementation plans for each aspect of the new education policy. Now, these plans will also list out actions to be taken by the different bodies, including the ministry, the state education departments, then come the state boards, then come the NCRT, the Central Advisory Board of Education and NTA, the National Testing Agency, among the others. Planning will be also followed with some kind of reviews in the quarterly forms or half-yearly form or the yearly forms. Everything has to be developed and planned accordingly. This is not a final thing that, yes, said that foreign collaboration, now this will be the 3 to 5 years, so that now a 3-year-old person has to from tomorrow start going to school. So this won't be the situation. This is a policy. Policy has to be implemented, and then if the policy has to be implemented, there will be some kind of directions which will be taken up by the different committees and the boards. So a lot has to be done right now. This is a major policy. This will give the direction to the various stakeholders. This is the mandate of a policy, basically.
Yes. Next question.
Okay, the next question is from Zishin Zafar. She is asking, if we look to the previous budget of central government, it is very clear that the share of government investment in public education is decreasing year by year. As per the present policy, the year of free and compulsory education is increased. It shows a water diamond paradox.
It is right. It is right when you say the government expenditure on education is decreasing. Though the policy says that 6% would now be of the GDP would now be spent in education. 6% was also one of the prime parameters of the government in 2004 and 1986. But till what extent it was implemented, we all know how what is the actual spend of government in education. It significantly needs to improve. Having said that, how it needs to be done? The question is not it needs to improve. The question is how it needs to be improved. Now, it needs to be improved by giving sufficient financial autonomy to various institutions. See, private institutions, we all know, everyone says some kind of hunky dory things about private institutions, or even the government criticizes private institutions a lot. But we all know some good private institutions actually has given us some good gems in the education sector as well. So we need to leave the private institutes to their own. We need to just make sure that they do not adopt malpractices and they adopt RTE Act to its full letter and spirit. Secondly, I think we need to subsidize the higher education as well, because I think there are very few institutions now where a lot of people are not able to afford education just because they are not from the privileged section of the society. So, though the lower education, the primary and the senior secondary education is, I think, subsidized, but the government could do something to even subsidize higher education in this regard. Stakeholder participation in this respect, or foreign collaborations, or investment in terms of infrastructure in education through foreign collaborations could be a good idea, because India, as we all know, has some really good teachers, but they are not able to give the best performance on the field. Why? Because they are not incentivized, they are not encouraged, they are not, they're highly regulated. So these all things need to be done away with. We live in the 21st century now, and it's high time we give our education institutions autonomy. Even government public schools should be left to their own. Regulation should only step in when there is any kind of malpractice. That's what I personally feel. And teachers should become teachers. Teachers should not become some kind of preachers or policy makers. Teachers should be teachers. Their job should be to teach. Teaching is one such profession which has
in terms for the higher education and the vocational training education, because all these kind of the vocational education and the e-learning is possible in English only, and the English community is doing well in this scenario. I don't think so that the education policy will hurt anyone here.
Okay, the next question is from Charu Agarwal. She is asking, isn't
Yes.
the policy being made considering only the upper section of the society? This will bridge the gap or will increase the gap. Any thoughts?
Yes, I think Charu is right when she says that this policy only covers the concern of the higher society. Why I say this is because of two reasons. One is it does not address, this policy document does not address key concerns which are there. The concerns which are there are in poor infrastructure. The second concern which is there is low efficiency of teachers. The third thing which is there is inadequate teaching staff, demotivated students. What we have done by way of this policy to change all this. So that is where I think the policy lacks. The policy does not address all these concerns, and these are the core concerns. If you see the Delhi education model, it has recognized, at least your first step is to recognize. It has recognized all these changes, and then it has worked on these things. So your first job is to recognize that these things are there. Only technology cannot solve all these problems. Only technology will not make students more, motivated. You need to give them incentives. You need to keep them interested in the education. You need to develop more interactive courses. You need to have more engaging teachers. We see the teachers teach as if they have to finish the job and go. Now, why do they do that? They do that because they're not incentivized. They're not promoted. They're not. All they have to do is to come to school and go back. So that is not how we will flourish. We need to address, we need to recognize all these concerns: poor infrastructure, demotivated students, inadequate teachers. We need to encourage our teachers and students, most importantly, for them to teach and for them to learn. And for that, I think the government's role should be minimal. The government's role should only be to regulate where it's required, not to interfere in the activities of teachers. Not to We see in government schools, teachers are given duties which are not part of the job. Why? They are not public servants. The government needs to stop treating them as public servants. They need to be treated as teachers because they are teachers. That is someone else's duty. So less mundane jobs where no one is interested in doing should be left to technology. All the human, see, teaching is basically very human. A student is less likely to learn from a robot or from a online automated lecture, and he's more likely to learn from a live class, in a live class. That is the true, because there is human interaction there. There is some kind of emotional connect there with the teacher. So we cannot forget that this teaching is a very human profession, human oriented profession. So we should try to encourage our teachers because they are the resource builders, and the students because they are the resources. So these things I think we need to work upon. Yeah, would you like to add something on this?
Yes, I would like to add. Charu, you have raised a very substantial question here. That you have said that why this is considering only the upper section of the society. Yes, at some until up to some extent, we can say that this is just considering the upper section of the society. But we should not forget one thing, that with the growing technology, the whole education industry has been touched by the growing technology. So now we see that the students want to interact more. So they want to interact with the students, they want to interact with the teachers, they want to interact with the school. So even the public and the private, both forms of education, एजुकेशन के लैंडस्केप में जो पब्लिक और प्राइवेट है, both of them want to come to the forefront to communicate with the teachers. Students want to communicate with the teachers. So one thing which the new education policy is not addressing directly in form of that providing some kind of extra beneficial thing to the public schools, but it is providing in the way that it is promoting actually the technological and the online education system in the country. Now, what is happening in the country is that because of the growing technology, this big education world, which we have, one must have heard about the K-12 education system. Now, what this K-12 education system is that some kind of revolution which has come in the form of digitization into the schooling system. The K+12 is the kindergarten plus 12 system. Yes. Now, in India also, according to a report, that there are around more than 10 to 20 lakhs K-12 schools in India, out of which some 54% are owned by the state or the central governments, and rest by the other municipal corporations, and others are privately owned. Now, we know that all these schools are affiliated to some kind of board, state board, CBSE, ICSE, and what all. Now, these kind of boards, what are they doing is that they are actually inculcating all these kind of revolutions in the Indian education system, which is mandatory for both the private and the government schools also. I have actually seen that in the government schools also, such kind of interactive platform for the teachers, for the teacher and the student interaction, where the teacher encourages a lot of question answer sessions. Then they provide assignments to promote the advanced learning habits in the students. Now, all this is being promoted, and why this is being promoted is because this is the need of the industry. See, sometimes I very well agree that this education policy is actually taken a leap over. Some people are saying that it is what is this government doing? The basic concerns were the gross enrollment ratio, the student dropout rates. Now they are not addressing this, but they are addressing the digitization. So people get confused that why this is happening. We have to do this, but we are doing that. So, but we are doing that so that we could reach there. Now, in this kind of scenario, especially in the times where there's the kind of geographical, there are kind of many kind of financial, economical, and the society challenges. For example, there's challenge to girls to attend the schools physically. Now, what is bad if the government is promoting, or if the government is coming up with the private sector to promote the online education where the girls from their homes are learning? What is bad in that? This is kind of that kind of approach which this new education policy has taken over. So one can understand this also. Definitely there are some loopholes, some kind of individual attention to the private public schools is being needed, and since long it is being needed. But if they are being addressed through the digitization and through a holistic approach, then what is the issue in that?
Yeah,
Yes.
Neha, sorry to cut you, but so the entire point is this, that so if we talk about digitization, right? So the underprivileged sector, I mean, we talk about digitization, they can't even afford smartphones, you know. So that's my whole point, was that the policy is made for the upper section of the society, because so especially for the underprivileged community, and you know, it's very hard for them to get access to digitization. They don't have smartphones, they forget about laptops and getting a Wi-Fi connection, you know. So that would eventually lead to a dropout ratio, which is still prevailing. And I think there's a taboo in India wherein you know, government schools, so going to a private school is considered as a class here, you know. So people don't like going to government schools. Not the reason about infrastructure or teachers. I think it has to do something with the social status. I think none of us would. I don't know. I mean, we would not want our kids to go to a government school because it's about a social status. So yeah.
Yes, you do make a point that because of the social stigma sort of thing with the attached with the private public schools, people prefer going to the private schools only. But this is not a problem which would be addressed by just one stakeholder, that is the government. Even we, for example, just understand that as we soon sometimes turn into parents, why shouldn't we send our children to the public schools? So because of that, more kind of facilities, if they would come up to the public schools, more kind of some kind of revolutionary changes which can be inculcated by the public schools only, then only it can be brought into the picture. Then only we can send some of the newer generation into the public schools. So yes, definitely, see, the basic problem is just not the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure. At least the digitization should be in equity. Digitization doesn't mean that we should just hand over a smartphone in each of the students' hands, and they should understand that digitization also means that such schools should have such kind of infrastructure where online education, for example, the recorded lectures can be provided to such children. This education, this gap in education should also be addressed simultaneously to the public schools.
To add on to what both of you said, I would just like to add one point here. See, it should be the duty of every school to make sure that there is seamless digitalization of education within their own premises. Now, how that can be done? That can be done if you have sufficient infrastructure again, and if you have motivated and well qualified teachers who are encouraging students to take such online activities. The problem lies that the school, the state level, government level state education is suffering because of lack of motivation. What I have seen is there is no motivation for the student, for the teachers, for the staff, for the administration. It is, they are working as if they are forced to work, though they are getting hefty salaries. Now, why there is lack of motivation? There is lack of motivation because there are things which are going unregulated. Teachers are being given duties which is not part of their job. Now, why should a teacher be given a duty, an election duty, for example? Is it a job of a teacher? No, it is not a job of a teacher. But we see in our state, the Rajasthan, where I belong to, teachers are assigned election duties and some political duties. Why? Is it their job? No. So there has to be less of politicization of education. The focus needs to be on education more, and the relationship between the teacher and a student should not be interfered in any manner. It is a very sacrosanct relation, and it should be left to that. That's what I want to say.
Yeah.
Yes. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. The last question is from Yash. He is asking, what about the conduction of board exams? Please explain that too. How will that change?
Neha, would you like to answer that? I would
yes,
like to I'll add
yes.
input later. Yeah.
Yes. So I just explained before also that as of now, the conduct of examinations has not been planned yet for like different boards, but they have said that the core competencies which are to be addressed or which are to be tested at the age when we reach a board examination would be tested, and the kind of the processes which were majorly in the form of the theoretical knowledge would be diluted. So this is what the basic policy directs the boards to decide themselves, but that would of course be decided at a later stage. Only policy direction they have given is that try to test the core competencies, try to avoid the factual and the theoretical kind of knowledge at that stage.
I would like to add on to one more thing here, just to conclude what Neha said. I think the focus should, even in the board exams, we see 10th and 12th board exams now. Obviously, there's a grading system, and things have improved for better. What we can do, one thing which the boards can do, is to make sure that even in the board classes which are 10th and 12th standard, there are sufficient mechanisms in place to self-assess, to be able to make sure that students can self-assess their performance, so they can perform better in the final examination. Now, what we see is they have unit tests or they have quarterly exams, but again, those exams are more or less designed by pre-designed, or they are more or less the same every year. There's no innovation in education. So for that, there has to be exercises, there has to be assignments which actually test the basic understanding, not which do not test how well a student has mugged up a particular provision or a particular thing. So the focus should be on innovative learning more. The focus should be on how we can reform human resource to education and not on anything else. Yes.
The last question from Trida Banerjee. If a student drops out, then will he or she be certified with the level of education that the student have achieved? And will that get notified anyhow?
Yes, I think, if a student drops out, there's always an option of open schooling or pursuing diploma as per the current education system. Now, if a student, the question is, when does a student drop out? If he drops out after 10th and he does not wants to pursue 11th and 12th standard, still, I think there is an option of doing diploma, right? Or some certificate courses. So, the focus, there's one thing called being qualified, and there is one thing called being educated. So if you're qualified, obviously the likelihood of getting a stable job improves by leaps and bounds. But if you're educated in a particular vocation, as I said, the concept of vocational education and foreign collaboration is there now in the new education policy. So if supposing a student is not interested in formal education and he wants to opt for a vocational education, he can do that. He can pursue his vocational training in any particular art form or craft form, and he can generate. He can just not get employed. He can generate his own employment. The government should come out now with sufficient policies to that effect, to make sure that students who drop out after 10th standard are not looked at upon as someone who are failures in life. they should be looked at upon someone who are different, who want to go into different kind of arts or crafts. So I think to that effect, the government can bring about some policies with the involvement of stakeholders. Neha, would you like to add something to it? Yeah.
I would like to answer one question which I can see in the chat. Puneet Rajora, he has asked that do you think that educational curricula should be developed to be a mixture of traditional and electronic education? Yes, definitely, Puneet. And this question has been addressed by the policy itself, that it says that such kind of mixed education and the traditional, the electronic, and the vocational education would start to be provided from the school level itself, so that the school children and the school students should also understand their potential and their talents. This is a very well approach to actually address, because what is happening is that right now the vocational education is being provided after the undergraduate level,
Yes,
now,
yes.
which is the major hindrance which has been also addressed at the various international forums in India, that why do we have to think about the vocational training after the undergraduate level, whereas it is the whole and soul of a person that what they want to do is to firstly understand at the stage of school that what is their talent about, what is their skill about, how they want to upskill themselves. So such kind of traditional, electronic, vocational, all such kind of education can be given at the school level itself to make the child understand that what are his capabilities and what is all the exposure about in the school too. So I guess
Yes. Any more
one person
questions?
has said, Jishan has said that please use
Yeah.
PPT while presenting the core area in next session. That will catch
We'll
us
keep
more.
that.
So
We'll
we
keep,
will do
keep
that,
in mind.
Jishan.
Yes.
We'll keep that in mind.
Sir, there's one more question from
Yes,
Jason Zapper.
Okay.
As per the present policy, the students start a specialization from 11th standard because on 10th grade. What will happen for this system once the new policy implemented? At what stage it started?
I think digitalization in 11th standard, I think is a very late. We are approaching it very late, because as we see in foreign countries, I mean, even in some institutions in India, students are learning basic computer skills like coding in at a very early age, which is very important. To have cognitive skills is equally important as to have analytical skills. So I think what can be done, the focus, see, we as human beings have a penchant for getting attracted to a particular thing. So now we are all talking about technology. Now